everyone. Happy Valentine's Day and welcome back to the Struggles of a 20-something podcast with me, Marge Villa Esther Castro. So today's a bit different because this is my first time that I'm doing the podcast on video format, which is something new. It's a bit different, but it's fun. So happy Valentine's Day, everyone. And today we're going to talk about love, but a bit on the darker side of it. Because I'm married, I'm corny and boring, but no, it's more of me talking about what I had to go through several years ago. So this is actually something that's deeply personal for me, but unfortunately, it's all too common. It happens to a lot of people, but it's not really talked about much. So today's topic is about getting out of a toxic relationship with a narcissist and then finally finding someone who is the total opposite or a complete green flag, yet still struggling with the trauma years later. So if you've ever felt like you should be over it by now, but you still get triggered by the smallest things, then this episode is for you. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and let's talk. So for the benefit of those who don't know me, because I know that majority of my audience are my family and friends, let me just give you a quick backstory. Let's rewind a bit. So 6-7 years ago, I met my ex-boyfriend, Jiro. Not his real name, but let's call him that. So when I first met Jiro, he was everything I thought I wanted. I was still in college. He was too. We met there. He was everything I thought I wanted. He was charming, respectful. He put in effort. He even won over my friends and my mom. So mind you, I grew up in Laguna, which is far south. I lived there, and he was from the east. So he would travel back and forth just so he could court me and my mom. A green flag, right? I know, but hold your horses. So the red flags were really loud. They were more like whispers. So the first instance that I should have started running, but I didn't, was few months in the relationship, he had me meet his family. That was in a restaurant near his house. And they were lovely. I love them. They were nice. They were the best. And I found out through them that all these months, my then boyfriend was lying about his age. So, what he told me was that he was just 2 years younger than me. But the reality was, he was actually 3 years younger than me. Not much of a difference, to be honest. But, it's a small deception that I kind of romanticized. It's, the young and naive me just thought that, oh, he liked me that much. Because he told me that, I'm sorry, he even cried. I'm sorry if I told you my real age, you wouldn't be with me. And, it felt like, oh, he really wanted to be with me that bad. And I shouldn't have done that. I should have ran. I should have recognized that as a sign of manipulation. So long story short, few months in to the relationship, I slowly lost my independence, I lost my friends, and ultimately myself. I'm not gonna dive into the specific details of what happened, so because that's not the topic, but I will add a link in the description box, a link to the blog post that I wrote a few years ago about some of the specifics if you're curious about how intense the gaslighting was and how it affected me. So if you want to know that, if you want to, go into that black hole, I'll have it linked in the description box. So while I was with him, gaslighting became my reality. Every fight was my fault. If another guy so much as looked at me, I must have done something to provoke it. And when I finally started to push back, to fight back, he kind of weaponized his own pain by threatening me that he will harm himself just so I will not call him out, just so I will not fight with him, just so I will not point out his mistake or his wrongdoings. And of course, I was young. It affected me. I didn't want my boyfriend to unalive himself or hurt himself because of me, right? So I always stopped calling him out. I tried to understand him. I tried to be very empathetic in terms of his mental health. So of course, few months into the relationship, I started to realize that something was wrong. Something was off. That whatever was happening is something that I do not deserve. I shouldn't let this happen to me. So I started to push back. I started to kind of greystone him. I started to just stay silent. Whenever he threatens to harm himself, I notice that he never does it. So I'll just let him. I just stay quiet and I just watch him do it. And he never done the worst. It was just those, fake harming himself. So I knew then that he was just doing that to manipulate me. But then, I really did love the guy. So when I started doing that, he didn't like it. He didn't like it when he couldn't manipulate me anymore. So he broke up with me. And me, again, I was young. I was naive. I was in love. So I begged for him to come back for 2 months. I did everything I could. And there are a lot of factors why I did this. And, some factors that I don't think I could say in public. But deep reasons why I wanted him to come back. Why I wanted him to stay. And then, eventually, he took me back. Yay! So, it was true love, I guess. At that time, he took me back. He actually basically begged for me to come back. He told me that he dated around and he was looking for me in all the women that he went out with. It felt good. So it felt like, oh, this must be love. That's why we're back together. Maybe we are destined to be with each other. Of course, I was young. Less than 24 hours into the relationship, he promised me that he will not manipulate me again. He will not gaslight me again. He will not be the paranoid man that he was. And then he asked me one favor. Can you block those guys that you are following again? Because when we broke up, I started, talking to people, those that he blocked before. I unblocked them. And I kind of rekindled my friendship with my friends, with my guy friends. But when he asked me to do that, I did. I did it, and then he cheated within 24 hours. Crazy, I know, but that's when I knew that I was done. That's when I knew that I did everything I could, and this is not the situation that I want to be in. So that was 7 years ago. And even after all this time, 7 years later, I'm already married. He still badmouths me to people we barely know. I know because he apparently he started dating someone who I have a lot of common friends with, and he says bad things about me, lies that are really, really far from the truth, that I don't know why he does that when we never communicated anymore. I never talk about him. It was weird. I relapsed when I found out that he was saying those things about me. But honestly, I think the lies are not the part that gets to me anymore. The hardest part that I have to face, that I have to go through, is how the trauma still sneaks up on me, even though I am now happily married to someone who is everything my ex was not. My husband is kind, supportive, he's patient, and he's safe. He not only makes me feel safe, he is safe. And I never felt that with my ex. So I feel bad. I feel bad that I still get affected, that I still relapse. But honestly, it's not something that I can't control. Trauma has a way of embedding itself so deeply that even when you're in a good place, even when you're surrounded by love and security, it still finds a way to show up. It's like a shadow that just follows you even in the brightest light. So, yeah, there's still a lot more. There's still a lot more to this story and this trauma dump, but let's leave it at that. And let's talk about why. Why does the trauma linger? If you're part of the population who never had to go through the same emotional trauma, you might be wondering why. Eh, Oh my gosh, you're so lucky. So, here's something important that I want you to understand. Healing is not linear. Trauma, especially from emotional abuse, from gaslighting and manipulation, doesn't just disappear once you're in a better situation already. Take it from me. I know this because I've had to go through a lot of expensive therapy sessions just to survive all of this. So, what happens is the brain kind of physically rewires itself when you experience prolonged gaslighting, manipulation, and fear. So even when you know rationally that your current partner is not your ex, your nervous system doesn't always get the memo, unfortunately. So something as small as the tone of voice, a certain phrase, or even just the feeling of being misunderstood can send you spiraling back into old defense mechanisms. As for me personally, I still find myself over apologizing for things that don't require an apology. I still have moments where my heart races over something insignificant because for months and years, insignificant things turned into massive fights. Fights that really ruined me, that really broke me, and I don't want to go through that anymore. And sometimes I find myself waiting for the other shoe to drop, even when there's no reason for it to. So let's talk about this relapses that I'm mentioning. Because yes, you can relapse into trauma responses even when you're in a completely healthy and loving relationship. And it's the most frustrating thing. You feel like you are self-sabotaging, like you should be fixed by now. Like, Marge, gosh, it's been 7 long years. Why are you still not over it? Why are you still relapsing? Like, your past shouldn't have this much power over you anymore. But the truth is, healing doesn't work like that. I've moved on. I've dated several guys after him. I don't feel any love towards him anymore. I don't even feel hate. It's just that I haven't fully healed from what has happened or what he has done to me. So for me, it's really the little things. For example, my husband takes too long to reply to a message. I get the irrational fear creeping in. If we have a small disagreement, I catch myself bracing for an overreaction from him, and it never came. So even though my husband never gave me a reason to doubt him, the fear that I might be too much or that I'm somehow going to push him away with what I do, or that I might be doing something wrong, I might be the toxic one in the relationship, it still lingers. And that's what trauma does. It conditions you. It conditions your brain to expect the worst. And if you let it, it can sabotage whatever good is happening, not just in your love life, but on your life in general. So what do we do? How do we work through the damage and move forward? So I'm going to share with you some things that actually helped me, and I hope it will help you too. But no pressure, because we all heal differently, and what worked for me might not work for you, but if it does, then good. And maybe it's worth trying if you haven't yet. So first thing that I did that really, really helped me is to acknowledge my triggers. So the first step to healing for me was really recognizing when it's trauma that is speaking. You know, when I start to feel an irrational fear or reaction coming on, I kind of take a step back and ask myself, is this about the present, or is this my past creeping in? And it helped. You know, it just kind of helps me ground myself and kind of put me back to the present and reflect about what's really going on. Because it's easy to let old wounds dictate how we respond in the present. But awareness is really important for you to break that cycle. What I did was to keep a physical journal. This is really something that I did. I was desperate, but it worked. So I kept a personal journal of moments when I feel triggered, and I reflect on them. I really take time to kind of sit down and reflect on them. I did this when I was still living in my parents' house. So I used to wake up around 4 a.m. so it's quiet, so no one will disturb me, and I will not feel awkward, like reflecting. So I grab a cup of coffee and I start to write down whatever thoughts I have and reflect on them. And over time, I started seeing patterns. And you know, once I saw them, I started kind of creating a plan as to how I can change them or how I could address these triggers. And it really helped me. It took a while. It was not like a very quick action plan, but it made a huge impact through time. So that might be something that you could try out as well. Next is to communicate things with your partner. This really helped me a lot, especially when I met my husband. So if you're in a healthy relationship right now, I strongly advise that you let your partner in. It's important to explain to them why certain things trigger you. So you're not going to use it as an excuse, but, just to give them context, just so they could understand better where you're coming from. And a good partner will want to understand and help you through it. Believe me, because my husband really put an effort to kind of power through this trauma with me. And I knew that he had a hard time doing so, but he did it anyway, and he's still doing it. like 4 years into the relationship. It doesn't matter if he's at work. He would drop everything. He would come home to me and just sit beside me. He will not force me to talk about it. He will just wait for me to do so. And if I don't, he will just be there. And once he sees that I've already calmed down, that's when he will leave, go back to work. It's really him that put in a lot of effort to understand me. And it's all because I gave him context. So remember, your trauma is not a burden to them. It should not be a burden to them if they love you. Because it's part of your story, and someone who truly loves you will want to walk beside you in that journey. They don't have to say anything or do anything. They just have to be there. And this is also a reminder to please do not use trauma as an excuse again. It's just you sharing what you went through. But don't use it as an excuse. Because those people who didn't contribute to your trauma does not deserve that. They don't deserve to suffer for the trauma that someone else caused. So work through this with them. Open and honest conversations can create a deeper bond. It will not drive a wedge between you and your partner if you're in the right relationship. Third one might be something that's really subjective and might be controversial to some. It's therapy. It helps, seriously. Personally, it helped me. It helped me a lot. So, trauma isn't just emotional. It's not just your feelings. It's neurological. It's in your mind. It doesn't just affect you emotionally, but it affects your mental health more than anything. So therapy helped me kind of rewire those thought patterns and give me coping strategies that actually work. So if therapy feels intimidating, what I did was to start with, self-help books, podcasts, or online support groups. If you're here, it's a good start. It just means that you are starting to acknowledge your trauma and you are starting to look for things that could help you get through it. And that's a good start. So I started there. I started listening to podcasts, reading self-help books, and, little by little, I started to get comfortable and talking about my trauma. And then I started to realize that I can do therapy already. And it helped me a lot. It helped me big time. So healing isn't about having all the answers right away. Because until now, 7 years after, I still don't have the answers to everything. Sometimes things happen or I feel emotions that still kind of frustrate me or confuses me. There are things that I still don't understand about trauma. But it's about taking small, intentional steps towards understanding and unlearning what hurt you. Because you can't stay there forever. And I know that you wouldn't want to stay there. So next is self-compassion. So give yourself grace. Healing takes time. And just because you have trauma doesn't mean you're broken. You are not failing at moving on, but you are learning to heal in the best way you can. So give yourself grace. Speak to yourself the way you would speak to your best friend. How you would appease and comfort your best friend. Remind yourself that these setbacks or these relapses don't mean failure. They are growth. So be patient with yourself and celebrate the small wins. Like, starting to notice that, this thing triggers me. Being able to acknowledge and notice a trigger before it takes over, or responding differently than you would have in the past, that's already a win. Seeing those small progress is already a win. So celebrate that. Because, before I had a relapse 7 years after, I really thought I made like huge progress because every day I celebrate like a day that I didn't think about him, a day that I didn't cry, a day when I heard like a song that used to remind me of him, but it didn't remind me of him anymore. I celebrated those moments. But then, eventually I relapsed. But it's a good thing that I celebrated those moments, because then I have things to look back on, and it makes me realize that, well, I already got this far. So I can go further. Then, lastly, is to remind yourself of reality. So, when old fear creeps in, ground yourself in the truth of your present situation. Like making yourself realize or reminding yourself that your current partner is not your ex. Your past does not define your future. You are safe now. So things like that. You can use affirmations, meditation, or other mindfulness techniques that you'll find on Pinterest or podcasts, whatever you can do to stay anchored in the present. So whenever your mind starts to spiral, take deep breaths and list the things that prove you are safe and loved in this moment. And that could help ground you and kind of take you back to the reality that you're in. So that's it. Those are things that help me. Healing isn't about erasing the past. It's about reclaiming your future. So every small step that you take towards healing is a victory. And I want you to know that you are stronger than the pain that you've endured. So if you're struggling with this, please know that you are not alone. Healing from an emotionally abusive relationship is a journey, and it's okay if some days are harder than the others. What's important is that you keep moving forward, even if it's just one step at a time. Even if it's 7 years already. What's important is that every day you take that conscious effort to move forward. Like I did. And I'm really, really, really proud of my progress. And I get to talk about this trauma because I already acknowledged it. I already put in effort to ground myself into the present. So I hope that me sharing what I had to go through for the past 7 years will help you power through yours. If I did it, you could do it. So yeah, thank you so much for being here and for allowing me to share this with you. If this episode resonated with you, please reach out. I'd love to hear your story. Maybe you can be a guest in my next episode. And if you think someone else needs to hear this, share this with them. That's it for today's episode. Until next time, this is Marjorie Esther Castro, and you're listening to The Struggles of a 20-something. Stay strong and take care of yourselves. Ciao.